Awesome. We all set, guys? Ready to rock and roll?
I'm ready. Get things
Ready?
started here. Like to welcome everyone to our webinar. Today we're talking about the call routing features in Boberdoo and the advantages that Boberdoo offers to the users here. To get things started here, we're going to look at a general overview. Lex, do you want to kick things off and talk about the overview of the routing?
Yeah, so I would say the beauty of Boberdoo and call routing is it's very similar to data leads. So if you're with us here today, excuse me, and you're familiar with the data lead side of things, there's really three key ingredients that buyers need to receive a call. And it's your classic active account, available funds, and matching filter set. And it's all predicated off of an integration with Twilio in that exact same account that you would standardly see from a data perspective.
All right. And as many people know with Boberdoo, we use Twilio to get the calls routed, and that offers some good advantages, and it's pretty easy. Brett, you can be able to touch on the how that is integrated.
Yeah, so plug and play, as we like to say here at Boberdoo. You just need to have an account with Twilio. So you go directly to Twilio.com and sign up for that account there. Soon that is done, it's going to give you a set of credentials, an account token, SID token, or what they're called from Twilio. Copy paste, plug and play, like I said before, copy paste those into the settings, Twilio settings option in your Boberdoo system. And from there, that makes the connection to Twilio. And we are already pre-integrated with their entire API suite for handling calls back and forth between the systems. So none of that needs to be set up. Just the credentials are plugged in. Once you have those plugged in, you can order phone numbers directly through your Boberdoo system at the click of a button, set any settings for how you want that call to flow, and those numbers are live. We usually see them about less than a minute or two for the numbers to be live once you order them through the Boberdoo interface in the Twilio account.
Brett, if somebody already has a Twilio account and they have existing numbers in that account and they're trying to set things up, can they use those existing numbers?
They absolutely can. We will just have to make one small adjustment on the back end. Our programmers have done this many times over through the years. Someone comes on, they have some nice vanity numbers that they want to keep, and so we can then transfer them into the Boberdoo system, and then they're fully live to go and ready to go.
And then with call routing, there is a level of delivery and how the bidding works. Brett, you're kind of the expert on that.
So yeah, there are, just like data leads, it's very common to have integrations to post the data from Boberdoo out to the buyer system. There's many different methods that can be done in Boberdoo the same way. And so one of the most common one is an API. Well, I'm going to start with the last one because it seems to be the most common nowadays. RTB, big buzzword, real-time bidding is what that means, dynamic bidding. So the vendor will send an API call to your Boberdoo system that contains the phone number of the lead and then any additional information, right? The zip code, their auto insurance year, auto insurance make, any fields that aren't collected in a phone call can be passed through this API so that the Boberdoo system can take that extra information, use it with our regular lead filtering like we do with data leads to come up with the best bid, best option, depending on the uniqueness of the call itself. So the RTB option allows more data to be used in that filtering process, which allows you to really, sculpt your lead price or bid that you want to have for a phone call, right? Because different zip codes, different states, different areas, and then different If it's a home improvement call, right? There's trades or projects. Is this a roofing call? Is this a windows call? All of that type of extra information can be used with this RTB. And again, the flow is just ping, get the bid back, and then if they say, okay, that's a bid I'm going to accept as a vendor, they then transfer the call through. And so that whole process gets done right in the boberdoo interface using the boberdoo processing. Back that up just a tad. It's actually very similar to RTB, but direct post plus a call. If you have a call center that just maybe has a sheet of information, all of this address and city and state, and they want to just post that data into boberdoo, then the call will follow. And at that point, the system will use that data to route the call, and then the data will then follow once the call is actually successfully transferred to the buyer. Because otherwise, if you try to send the data first, it will never work, because what if the first buyer doesn't answer the call and it rolls to the next buyer? Well, then buyer 2 got the call, but buyer 1 got the data lead. And so this method of direct post plus call allows those call centers or anyone submitting data to submit that full lead. We kind of hold it in boberdoo to wait for, okay, now the phone call came through and it matched to buyer ABC. Great. Now we know to send the data to buyer ABC. And the last and by far the simplest option are just raw calls. You put the phone number that you order through Twilio onto your website, and someone comes to your website, and instead of filling out a form, they see that number and they just call that number. If you could do raw calls, not having an IVR even, so just the raw call comes through and we do a transfer to the buyer of who can take the call at that time. Otherwise, there's the IVR, and playing into this additional data, the IVR is how additional data can be collected from the lead or consumer without having to ask them to fill out a form or have a call center submit the data before. And so, the most very, very common one will be enter your zip code, right? What is your 5-digit zip code? You punch that in, that data is captured with the call, and then boberdoo uses that information to route the call to make sure the correct buyer gets it.
A lot going on there.
A lot of different ways.
Well, yeah. Well, and you're talking a lot about in terms of the matching, but then there's also distribution logic. And Lex, I imagine that's a common question you get from a lot of new clients in terms of what options there are about distribution logic.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that stuff falls hand in hand as well. Everything that, Brett essentially just detailed ties directly into where are these going, right? Oftentimes folks will come to us and say, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do the other? And the answer from a broad perspective is yes. It's more of a business decision on your end as opposed to whether or not we could do something. Typically, the big three that we would see more times than not would be priority, best price, and EPL. Priority is, as you would likely imagine, who takes priority in terms of receiving that call. You might have geo areas, specific verticals. So if we tie it into, roofing down in Florida, you might have 15 contractors. Who holds the highest priority? If that's the route you're looking to go. Best price is another one. Everybody wants revenue, right? So generally speaking, oftentimes I use the phrase that, the seller conforms to the buyer. And we're talking calls, not necessarily data. So it's less best exclusive versus some of your non-exclusive, but the same rules apply, especially when we start to talk about RTB, that dynamic bidding side of the equation. Lead comes through, call comes through, who returns that highest bid or responds with that highest bid, and then distribute accordingly, with EPL being somewhat of a hybridization, if you will, or calculation between the two, which, Brett, I'm sure you have more to state there.
Yes, thank you. So, EPL being a more of a calculation that's coming through on the fly, and while that's also the same for priority and best price, technically, right? We're doing something to figure out who should be the top bid, right? And so with EPL, it's actually tracking kind of past performance. And so it can be complicated, but it does provide a very clear type of, quote unquote winner when we're talking about EPL and EPL earnings per lead, expected earnings per call, however we want to label that. What happens is you, as the client, in your lead filter set for the buyer, if it's set to EPL, you can set the number of calls to consider. So how many calls should be used to calculate this EPL value, right? And so it's going to divide the total revenue by total attempts, total revenue being for leads that have successfully matched, sold, and stayed as sold to that buyer. And that's important because in the world today, there's lots of buffers out there for phone calls, right? The buyer says they will only take that call if it lasts at least 60 seconds or maybe 90 seconds. And so if those calls don't last that duration, they match to this account, but then it rolls back the transaction, almost like gives it a refund at that point. And so that's treated as a call that connected, but no revenue was associated with that call, right? So the end of the day, once you have your filter sets configured with the different EPL values that you want to use, the number of calls to look for, the system on the insert will look and say, okay, well, these three buyers can get it based on the filters. Who has the highest EPL value? And so we look at those three individual account filter sets to calculate what their exact EPL value is. Highest EPL value gets the call attempted to them. It says at the bottom here, rewarding the buyers with the actual realized connect rates. And so you have someone that's paying $100 per call, but they don't answer the call. Well, they might as well be paying you nothing, right? Because there's no revenue associated with those calls. Maybe the guy that has a smaller or lower lead price, $20, but they answer every single call. The system takes that into account on the next call that comes in to then route it to those that actually answer the calls successfully and actually generate revenue in the system.
I think we have a few of our clients that are really using that effectively as well. So if you want more information, contact us. As far as getting data and calls and the marriage of all that, Lex, the IVRs I think is one way, but talk a little bit about the options and how that flow works.
Yeah, certainly, and it ties back to what Brett was discussing a couple of slides ago. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of how folks pass things through. And again, it's going to be very similar to what you see with data leads. It's more of just defining what fields you do need or require into the system and how granular you want to get with things. Oftentimes, we're starting to talk about filter sets and what you're looking to drive or how granular you want to get within those in terms of where these calls are ending up when it's all said and done. So with lead types, we generally have defaults in place. Bobber's been around for 26 years, so we've developed over the course of the years with what we see consistently as at least what we deem as standard. But there is a lot of flexibility there if somebody comes through needs internal tracking fields, granular fields with specific project types. If we keep the conversation on home services, for example. And so on and so forth. So it's relatively, straightforward. It's more of request based, dependent on the individual use case at hand.
Nice, thank you. To build off of that, the IVR stuff, we have a full IVR manager in the system. It's an easy way to create your own recordings where you can have a little UI that visually shows you the mapping of one step to the next. Just for example, keeping it with the home improvement and home services, the first question that's probably asked is zip code, like we said before. But after that, now it's, hey, press 1 for windows, press 2 for roofing, and so forth. You can keep going off of that if you really wanted to. There's a fine line, though, with IVRs. You want to be able to collect a bunch of information, of course. However, you want to make sure that that lead or consumer finishes that IVR so the call actually gets through. So the more questions you have, that's the give and take of figuring out that perfect. I don't think anyone in the world knows what the perfect answer is there. But having the IVR options, at least, to extend those out if you need to, those can be done right in the system, as well as making one if maybe you don't want to say anything, you just want silence. There's a silence option. Or the default recording that you'll see in every system is this call may be recorded for quality purposes. That's in there because there are many states that require that to be said on the call, and so it's just a disclaimer. That's something you should discuss with your legal team, of course, but just giving some feedback based on things we've discovered in the past. And so go on to the last one too here. The unmatched call handling, the fail safes, right? So what happens if someone comes through and they call a number and they go through the IVR and there's no one on the other line, right? Maybe they called in the middle of the night. Maybe they called from a state like Alaska. There's no buyers taking. For whatever reason, their call was not able to be serviced. Now this is where we have some nice ways to handle it just out of the box with a few clicks. Unmatched call handling will be either a default phone number. So at each campaign level, you can set what we call a default phone. And this is the last line of defense. If there's no one taking calls, this is where the calls will go to at that moment. And so we usually recommend this to be a voicemail line. It could be an office phone number, your cell phone, something to capture that information through a voicemail somehow. And then lastly, there's an option for you just hang up on it, but then you'll have a voice to text, speak to it and say some type of message. Sorry, we cannot help you today, or no buyers available. Something along those lines can be then whispered back to the lead to let them know.
So then the logic of really this is the filter sets that are really having the power here in terms of Brett, talking about the prices and such.
Yeah, so the filter sets, just like data leads, right? They're the same thing, right? You're going to plug in the information of what can be routed, what types of calls can be routed. So starting with the first section here, financial logic. We have, of course, the lead price. If you're charging them a flat rate per lead, this is the value that you'd enter into that field. Dynamic bid. If they have dynamic pricing, meaning that the buyer has a system on their end that's able to bid dynamically, those values are automatically overriding the lead price and used in those use cases. So there are ways to combat low bids, one of them being the minimum ping price. In most systems, it's probably in the custom delivery wizard. Some systems, it's been moved to the lead filter set. If that's something that you're interested in having in your system, we could definitely move it to the filter set. But allows you to plug in a price value, let's say $5, and that way, if the dynamic bid pings out to this buyer and they return less than $5 as their bid, the system will automatically consider it as an error and flag it as a failure. So they bid a successful bid amount, but it wasn't high enough, so we mark it as an error. Now we can get into some other kind of discounting logic with these fake ping price and profit margins and premium add-ons. So fake ping price is a way you could use percentage values or flat bid amounts to reclassify what the real price is to move that account up or down in the logic. So if you gave them a fake ping price of $90, the system uses $90 as the consideration price, but then they're always charged the real bid amount. And then profit margin, if you are reselling leads, this is a way for you to take out your piece of the pie. So it comes from vendor A, you try to sell it to buyer B. Buyer B offers $10. There's a 10% margin at the filter set level for that buyer. You would take 10% off of the dollar amount and present that final value back to the vendor as what you are willing to offer that vendor for the lead. If they then agree to that, they would post the lead and you sell it for the actual lead price, and your cost is the price minus that margin of what you owe that vendor. You make your profit margin then per lead. Now, with the routing rules, I think we could look at this as the same idea. Just in the filter set, you have different options that you can select here for how and where you want to route the call. So ring to number, you might hear the word DID, which is a direct inward dialer number. It's a phone number. It's the only thing that matters. And so if you have a buyer that says, I want my calls transferred to this phone number, and they give you that phone number, you're going to plug that in as the ring to number for that buyer. That way boberdoo knows to connect through Twilio, of course, to connect that number to the ring to number. Just like pricing can be a lead price or a dynamic bid, and here you can be a direct number or it could be a dynamic number. So we send a ping out to some buyer and their system says, yes, I want that call. I'm willing to bid $50 and here's the number to transfer it to. We would then capture that number dynamically to then use as the ring to number for that individual lead. The next call, right, it's a different dynamic number that's returned back, and that's kind of the beauty of it. You can have different numbers returned back and then grab them right through the response. There is another option for delivering. Maybe you don't want to send it to a number, you want to send it to SIP, which is a way you can kind of transfer it instead of through a phone number, through an email address, so to speak. And those transfer rates and those prices are very, very much lower from a per minute fee and a setup fee. So a lot of people are kind of navigating themselves to have SIP set up to keep those options nice and cheap for transferring calls. Lastly, in this middle one, the call concurrency limit, that's just how many calls can a number get at the same exact time. This is something always you want to ask your buyer this question directly. Like that's just a question you're going to ask them. How many calls can he take at the same time? You want to then plug that number in as the filter set for the concurrency limit to be that exact same number, because if someone says 4 and there are 4 active calls matched to an account and a 5th one comes in, if they can't answer that call because they only have 4 available people to talk, having that set allows the system to then route it to another buyer that is available to take the call. So the concurrency limits help you manage what calls or how many calls can go to them, but the number should be picked by the buyer. It shouldn't be something that you set on your end. Just, oh, I think it should be 5. That will really help make sure calls get connected. Now, lastly, are the quality controls, and these are very important. Per minute fees, time of the day, minimum duration, timeout duration. All of these can impact whether the call is shown as billable or not. Per minute fees, there is an option for that. Not many people do it, but if you want to extend your buyers, a per minute fee on top of the lead price, that's what that could be used for. Time of the day of the week pricing, right? Maybe weekday calls are more money than weekend calls, or evening calls are less money than mid peak time calls. Those can be used to change the price value that you want to charge them based upon that time of the day of the week. Minimum duration is the biggest one. Most people will have this set no matter what, and this is how long the call has to last for you to charge them for that call in Boberdoo. And it says causes rollback if unmet. That's kind of what I referred to before. It's almost like a refund. We roll back that they don't get charged for it, and they don't have that call in their account then. Timeout duration. This is how long Boberdoo attempts to dial the number from the filter set. 30 seconds is usually the standard. You're going to ring and give the person 30 seconds to try and answer. And then that can be used to make sure, again, kind of like the concurrency, making sure that those calls can route to who can take the call. Calls falling to the floor is a big thing, and using all of these options here can really help combat those.
Quality controls also kind of brings into the conversation the analytics, and that's looking then at all of the leads that you have matched, but knowing more about it, Lex, you get probably a lot of inquiries on these conversations that you have with our clients.
Yeah, right. The outcome obviously matters. The simple part is getting it from point A to point B, but what happens in between is often where folks can scale and take things to that next level. Within Boberdoo, obviously, you're going to have your standard reports. I want to say from a default, there's probably 80 or so out of the box. We can also manipulate, create some custom things for those that request or require that beyond what's offered just out of the box. But at the end of the day, there's your classic call recordings through that integration with Twilio, but taking it even a step further outside of what we can do in-house, there's also third-party AI tools that we can post back to, send webhooks to, run API submissions, things like an OnScript, Caliper, or if anybody else listening here today is using something else that has that API functionality, you can use that as kind of an additional reporting suite on top of what Boberdoo offers to get as granular as you'd ultimately like to take things.
And so next, we have what we're referring to as the omni-channel, and I think Scott is with us also on this to touch on that. Scott.
Hi, everybody. I'm the good-looking brother. That's why you get to see my face. And we're hiding Brett in the basement. But
I'm not allowed to come
up. So I wanted to just introduce something that we're working on. Hope to have a beta out for some pilot programs here pretty soon. It's the concept of omni-channel leads. So currently, all flows are single channel, meaning that if you display a phone number to a client, they're going to call that number. They don't have a form option. If you display a form, then you might lose out on a call buyer. So what we've done is try to combine all three channels into one unified auction for that consumer. So the idea is that very similar to a data lead, the first step of a form would be to collect any ping data. For example, in home improvement, project and zip code. That would be then used to evaluate that consumer for their revenue scenarios at the call level, at the lead level, both exclusive and non exclusively, and then at the click level for a redirect of that consumer to another landing page. And so the idea is that ping comes in. If your best revenue scenario, it's Monday at noon, is a call buyer for $100. The second step of the consumer for the consumer is a dynamic phone number. If that consumer calls in, all of the attribution collected on that initial ping can be associated with that call. The same scenario, Monday at noon, different zip code. Now that lead matches both to a call buyer and to a non-exclusive revenue scenario that can be sold 5 times for $25 each. So that $125 revenue scenario is the best. The second step for that consumer is the contact fields for a traditional form, allowing them to submit a data lead into the system to post at that higher revenue scenario. And then if we take the third example would be, hey, it's midnight on Saturday. You have a consumer come to your website and you do not have any buyers, but you do have a click buyer for $5. That is the best revenue scenario. We then redirect the consumer to that landing page, charge the $5 for the click. So this omni-channel flow allows you to simplify the setup of a given partner, just determining hours that they want calls and data parameters. And so you don't have to have multiple filter sets set up for multiple partners. You can really simplify that setup and then monetize more of your traffic.
That sounds pretty amazing. And if I guess you could say, like the old saying, if you don't like that, well, then you don't like generating leads and selling them.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, if anybody participating is generating leads and would like to participate in beta when we get it released, please reach out.
And we do have one more.
Yeah, I mean, to Scott's point, it's all about aggregation, automation, and scale, right? Obviously, the topic of today's call was calls, but if you guys are also doing clicks and or leads, the idea is bring everything into one centralized ecosystem, avoid some of those fragmented operations, and keep it all under one hood. We're not going to be running any sort of upcharges when it comes to Twilio minutes, DIDs, anything like that. What you see is what you get. It's as simple as plug your credentials in, use our platform the rest of the way. And again, have those kind of singular touch points in terms of the reporting, compare and contrast between leads, clicks, calls in one interface. You're not bouncing back and forth between things, and take it as far as you'd like to go.
All good stuff. That's our show for today. Appreciate everyone who's joined us there. Hopefully we've stimulated some imagination. And if you'd like to learn more about that, we definitely are available for any questions you have. Reach out to us with email or however you prefer. Other than that, I think do we have the ability to take some questions from anyone?
Yeah, we've got the chat in the bottom right corner if anybody listening has any questions for us.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Not seeing any immediate chats. Well, I could throw a couple questions out. Lex, you get a lot of questions these days about AI. I know we talked about that a little bit in this presentation, but I would imagine that's getting to be a hot topic.
Yeah, across the lead industry as a whole. Looks like Brian's actually got something in here. Brian tipped in.
Great.
Just want to say thank you. Screen sharing. Yeah, Brian, I'm with you. A little OCD on my end as well. But I mean, AI, it's a classic buzzword in the lead space, right? Um, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. We have folks from a partner admin perspective, those that are selling leads. They want their buyers to log into the system, have their own kind of unique experience. So a lot of that's API driven, and really, when it's all said and done, it's going to be API connections across the board, right? So whether we're posting to an analytics tool, it's a partner admin, reporting, whatever the case may be, it's all driven through APIs and ultimately taking it, wherever the folks, ultimately need that to go.
Other than that, I think we'll call that a day on this one, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.